Alright, so I'm gonna be honest with you guys. I was going into this movie and I was like, there's no way I'm gonna like this movie. It's gonna be a piece of shit. I'm gonna rip it apart. I just know it. And I walked out of the movie actually thinking to myself, bear with me, I was right. And that's why you never doubt yourself. The Smurfs 2. So The Smurfs 2 is the sequel to The Smurfs, which I never did a video on because I was like, you know what? I'm taking one back for myself. I'm not gonna watch the first Smurfs movie, so I never saw The Smurfs 1. However, I never got the feeling, even after watching this movie, that if you haven't seen the first Smurfs movie, this experience is gonna be completely ruined for you. You know what you need to know. And in The Smurfs 2, you have the Smurfs, and they're in Smurfland. Gargamel's in our world, and he's a magician, because everyone's like, oh, he turns people into frogs. He's a great illusionist. So he gets a lot of money to play these big gigs, but he still wants to wipe out all the Smurfs and take over the world. And Gargamel has his like bad, devious Smurfs. He calls them naughties or little gray Smurfs. Smurfette was one of those at one point, but Papa Smurf turned her good, and now Gargamel's like, I'm gonna turn Smurfette bad again. And so now we have the Smurfs 2. I appreciate the elements in it. Neil Patrick Harris, great. Charlie from Heroes, I know her as Charlie from Heroes. I should know her as her actual name, but I know her as Charlie from Heroes. Yeah, I'm a professional like that. Brendan Gleeson's in this movie. He doesn't know why, but he's in there. I even had a Papa Smurf Pez when I was a kid, so I'm like, why wouldn't I like this movie? The answer's simple, and I will explain it to you. I'm gonna get this out of the way right off the bat. Sadly, it feels like everyone in this movie is kind of phoning it in because they all know that this movie's made for kids. So they're like, we can give half-ass performances, and they do. Doesn't mean they're bad actors. It just means they know nothing was expected of them. And now they're here to get their paycheck, and this is just how it goes. So yeah, the acting's not great. The writing is not great either. Hank Azaria as Gargamel's the guy where you're like, he's having the most fun with the movie. Does it save the movie? Does it make the movie good? It does not. But you can tell he's like, well, if I'm phoning it in, I'm gonna have fun doing it. There are movies that are made for families, and that's different than movies that are made for kids. Movies that are made for families, it's like adults can go to it, kids can go to it, everyone's gonna have a good time. Movies that are made for kids, adults pawn the kids off to a babysitter, and the babysitter takes them to watch it. The adults are like, we dodged that bullet. This is that one. So in that, I'm like, it's a kid's movie. I am an adult. It's not made for me, so maybe I should take it a little easy on the movie. But I shouldn't, and I can't, and here's why. Because the movie completely panders to the kids that the movie's made for, and it goes on the assumption that kids need everything explained for them. That's the best way to go about making a kid's movie, and it's not true. This movie's so in your face, it leaves nothing to the imagination. Kids don't have to use their brain at all in the movie, which sucks. It's terrible. It's doing kids a disservice. It's making your kids dumber when they watch it. Example, not really a spoiler. It's kind of whatever. So Smurfs 2, are you really concerned with spoilers? This is just one example off the top of my head right here, but there are a lot of others in this movie. The big thing in this movie is family and what's important. And it has a parallel in there. There are a couple of different family issues happening in the movie. So when Papa Smurf and the Smurfs go to save Smurfette, a smart movie would be like when she's like, oh, you came for me. Maybe Papa Smurf can like, you know, do that thing, the finger on the chin thing where he's like, of course. And maybe she looks up and has a tear and they hug. And you get the fact that the important thing is family and they both understood that in that moment. And then kids will be like, oh yeah, oh family, I get it. But they had to use their brain for a second to connect A to B and be like, why did he, oh, yeah, family. In this movie, Papa Smurf will be like, of course, because we're family, and that's what family does. In which case, it's explained to kids what the thing is, and so kids don't have to use their brains. It's just explaining the entire movie to kids. And that's what every take in this movie is. Everything is just explained to kids. There's nothing that they have to use their brains for. If you don't spoon feed the answers to kids in the movies and you force them to go, oh, hey, I need to piece that together, then they'll have to do that. And maybe they won't piece everything together because they're too young, but they'll watch the movie a few years later and be like, oh, I didn't catch that when I was younger, now I caught that now. And that has replay value and relevance, and it holds the test of time. This movie has none of that. They have all the answers the first time they watch the movie, no matter what age they are. It just bums me out. I'm not saying kids need a mental test when they watch a movie. There is less enjoyment in a movie when everything is just given to you at face value. That's what The Smurfs 2 does. Everything's at surface value, just simple dialogue, simple jokes. Like the movie was written in crayon by a 3-year-old. It's a movie that you turn on when you have a family get together so you can just plug the kids in and the adults can go smoke cigars and drink brandy or wine, get trashed, and just forget the fact that they're parents for a couple hours. And will it work? Yeah, it will. For like 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds will lock into this movie just fine and be like, I'm entertained because I'm 2 years old and that's enough for me. In fact, if you put this movie on to shut your kids up for a couple hours and just entertain them mindlessly, and you have access to any other kids movie around or Netflix, you have failed. You have failed them. Just pray to God none of them become president. There is a scene in this movie that actually put this movie into perspective for me. And here it is. There's a scene where Azrael the cat's just perplexed with his laser pen. Someone's shining a little laser pen and he's trying to get hit the dot like cats do, but he can't. Just like Azrael the cat. Kids will see this and they'll be entertained because it's there. It's just there and it's entertaining them because it's motion on a screen. There are much better kids movies out there. If people have not completely shit on this movie, it's because of one scene and one scene only. And the scene is, actually this might be kind of a spoiler, but are you really concerned? The scene is the baddies and Gargamel are trying to get Smurfette, you know, to kind of turn to the dark side. There's a scene where the Smurfs are on the other side of this window and she finally gets a little wand and she's like, yeah, it's good being bad. And she starts shooting laser bolts and their hearts break. They're like, oh no. And she blows out the window and all the Smurfs blast backwards. It has the right amount of heart, the right amount of emotion, the right amount of slow-mo. Right there, I was like, maybe this movie isn't a complete piece of shit. Then the very next scene, the very next moment, the Smurfs haven't even hit the ground yet. They're still falling, and now we hit shtick and bullshit humor and just everything that makes the scene before it crumble into insignificance. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's done and over with. The emotional tone is now just gone. I just don't see why we need a Smurfs movie that takes place in our world, where you have real actors that are good actors forced to be shitty actors, phoning it in for a paycheck when you can have the Smurfs in their Smurf land and Gargamel up in his castle, and Gargamel's trying to take out the Smurfs, and the Smurfs, you know, they join together and they try to take out the big life-size asshole who's trying to just stomp him out. That would be, why can't you do that? It'd be a good animated family movie. But no, we have this movie. It gives nothing to adults. It gives nothing to kids. I don't know why. You know why this movie was made? Because the first one made $500 million worldwide. That's why we have the Smurfs too. This movie wasn't entirely dog shit though. It was smurfing Smurf shit. All right, so what is the worst family movie that you've seen? You know those movies that are made for kids where you're like, that's just unwatchable. Whatever it is, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.